The morning sun painted the Arizona territory in shades of gold and crimson as 17-year-old Isabella Rodriguez stepped out of her family's adobe home. The year was 1882, and the small settlement of Copper Springs had grown around her father's successful general store. Isabella had known no other life than this peaceful existence, where the biggest excitement came from the monthly supply wagon, arrivals from Phoenix. Her dark hair caught the desert breeze as she walked toward the well, carrying 2 wooden buckets. The routine was as familiar as breathing fetch water. Help her mother Maria with breakfast, then spend the morning organizing inventory in the store. Isabella often wondered if this predictable pattern would define her entire existence. Buenos Dias, Mia, called her neighbor, Señora Gutierrez, hanging laundry on a rope stretched between 2 mesquite trees. Your father left early again for the trading post. Isabella nodded, lowering her bucket into the cool depths of the well. Eduardo Rodriguez had built a reputation as one of the fairest traders in the territory, dealing with ranchers, miners, and even the Apache bands that occasionally came to trade. Unlike many settlers who viewed the Apache with suspicion and fear, Eduardo believed in honest commerce with all people. As Isabella drew up the first bucket, she noticed unusual activity near the eastern ridge. A small group of riders approached, moving at a steady pace rather than the urgent gallop that usually accompanied trouble. She shaded her eyes against the morning glare, counting 6 figures on horseback. "Apache," whispered a voice behind her. Isabella turned to find Thomas Brennan, the banker's son, approaching with obvious nervousness. Thomas had been courting her for months, bringing flowers and awkward compliments whenever their paths crossed. His pale complexion seemed even whiter than usual as he stared at the approaching riders. "They come to trade," Isabella said simply, continuing her task. "Papa has dealt with them many times." Thomas shifted uncomfortably, his hand instinctively, moving toward the pistol at his hip. "My father says we can't trust any of them, after what happened at Skeleton Canyon last year." Isabella had heard the stories of conflicts and misunderstandings between settlers and Apache bands, but her father had always maintained that most troubles arose from fear and miscommunication rather than inherent hostility. Eduardo spoke several Apache dialects and had earned respect through fair dealing and genuine respect for their customs. The riders drew closer, and Isabella could see they were indeed Apache. Their leader sat tall on a paint horse, his long black hair flowing freely in the wind. Even at a distance, there was something commanding about his presence. The group moved with the fluid grace she had observed in previous Apache visitors, each rider seeming to become one with his mount. "Isabella, come inside immediately," Maria Rodriguez called from their doorway, her voice tight with concern, but Isabella found herself rooted to the spot, watching the lead rider as he guided his horse toward the trading post. There was something different about this group, though she couldn't identify exactly what, as they moved with purpose, but without the urgency of those seeking immediate trade or assistance. Thomas grabbed her arm roughly. "Didn't you hear your mother?" "These savages could—" "Don't call them that," Isabella interrupted, pulling free from his grasp. Her father had taught her that such words revealed more about the speaker than those being described. "And don't touch me like that again, Thomas Brennan." The young banker's son flushed red, whether from embarrassment or anger, Isabella couldn't tell. "I'm only thinking of your safety. Proper young lady should." "A proper young lady thinks for herself," Isabella replied, lifting both water buckets and walking toward her home. As she reached her door, she couldn't resist one more glance toward the trading post. The Apache leader had dismounted and stood speaking with her father, who had emerged from the building with his characteristic welcoming smile. Even from this distance, she could see the respectful posture both men maintained, hands visible, voices calm. "Mia, please come inside," Maria repeated, though her tone had softened. "I have fresh tortillas ready, and we need to prepare for the morning customers." Isabella entered their home, but positioned herself near the window where she could observe the trading post. The Apache leader was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps in his mid-20s. His clothing was a mixture of traditional and acquired items, buckskin leggings and moccasins, but also a cotton shirt that had likely come from trade. Around his neck hung what appeared to be a distinctive silver medallion. Right. His name is Ayana. Her father said later that morning as they arranged merchandise on the store shelves. It means eternal blossom in his language. He's the son of a respected chief from the White Mountain Band. Isabella tried to appear only casually interested. What did they come to trade? Beautifully worked silver jewelry and some of the finest. Turquoise I've ever seen, Eduardo replied, his eyes lighting up with genuine appreciation. They wanted coffee, sugar, and ammunition for hunting. Fair trades all around. Did they say anything about staying in the area? Her father gave her a knowing look. They're camped near Willow Creek for a few days. Jana mentioned needing to rest their horses before continuing north. He paused, studying his daughter's face. He asked about our family. Seemed particularly interested when I mentioned having a daughter. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks. Papa, that's hardly proper. Conversation for a business transaction? Eduardo chuckled. Perhaps not, but he struck me as a young man of honor and intelligence. His English is excellent, and he carries himself with dignity. He became more serious. Of course, such friendship across cultures can be complicated, Mia. There are those in town who wouldn't understand. That evening, as Isabella helped her mother prepare dinner, she found her thoughts returning repeatedly to the brief glimpse of the Apache leader. There had been something in his bearing, a quiet confidence that seemed almost familiar, though she was certain they had never met. The sun was setting behind the western mountains when she heard horses approaching again, peering through the window. She saw a lone rider, the same paint horse and tall figure from the morning. This time, however, the visitor dismounted not at the trading post, but near the well where she had first seen the group arrive. The Apache warrior stood quietly beside, his horse as if waiting for something or someone. In the growing twilight, Isabella could see him more clearly. His face was strong and serious, but not harsh. The silver medallion at his throat caught the last rays of sunlight. After several minutes, he remounted and rode away, but not before. Glancing once toward the Rodriguez home, Isabella stepped back from the window, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't fully understand. The next morning brought unexpected visitors to Copper Springs. Isabella was sweeping the front steps of the general store when she noticed Mrs. Catherine Brennan, banker's wife, approaching with 3 other prominent ladies from town. Their expressions were stern, and Isabella immediately sensed trouble brewing. "Good morning, Isabella," Mrs. Brennan said, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for delivering unwelcome news. "We need to speak with your father immediately."
Eduardo
emerged from behind the counter, wiping his hands on his leather apron. His smile faded as he took in the serious faces of the women. "Good morning, ladies. How may I assist you today?" "It's about your business practices, Eduardo," Mrs. Brennan began, her chin raised in righteous indignation. "The entire town is talking about your associations with those Apache savages." Isabella watched her father's jaw tighten slightly, though his voice remained calm. "I conduct business with many people, Catherine. All of them are treated with equal respect and honesty." "That's precisely the problem," interjected Mrs. Henderson, the preacher's wife. "These heathens cannot be trusted. They're planning something, mark my words. Why else would they linger near our town? Perhaps because they're human beings who need rest and supplies. It's just like anyone else," Eduardo replied, his patience beginning to wear thin. "Human beings." Mrs. Brennan laughed harshly. "Eduardo, these creatures have no souls, no understanding of Christian civilization, and yet you welcome them like honored guests." Isabella felt anger rising in her chest. She had grown up listening to her father's stories about the dignity and complex culture of the Apache people. Their spiritual beliefs, their deep connection to the land, their intricate social structures, none of it matched the crude stereotypes these women were spreading. "Mrs. Brennan," Isabella said, stepping forward, "perhaps you should meet them." Before making such judgments, the banker's wife turned her sharp gaze on Isabella. "Young lady, it's precisely this kind of naive thinking that will get us all killed in our beds. Your father has filled your head with dangerous nonsense. My father has taught me to see people as individuals, rather than making assumptions based on fear and ignorance," Isabella replied firmly. The 4 women exchanged shocked glances. Mrs. Henderson placed a dramatic hand over her heart. Such disrespect, Eduardo. You must control your daughter before she brings shame upon your family. That afternoon, Isabella found herself unable to concentrate on her usual tasks. The morning's confrontation had left her feeling restless and frustrated. The narrow-mindedness of the town's leading ladies seemed particularly suffocating after her father's stories of Apache wisdom and philosophy. She decided to walk to Willow Creek, officially to gather wild herbs for her mother's cooking, but secretly hoping for another glimpse of the Apache camp. The creek was about 2 miles from town, winding through a grove of cottonwood trees that provided shade and privacy. As Isabella approached the creek, she heard voices speaking in a language she didn't recognize. Moving carefully through the trees, she found a small clearing where 3 Apache men sat around a low fire. One of them was Ayana, the leader she had observed the previous day. She had intended to remain hidden, simply observing from a distance. But a dry branch snapped under her foot. All 3 men looked up immediately, their hands moving instinctively toward their weapons before they recognized her as the trader's daughter. Ayana rose gracefully,
Ow,
and spoke to his companions in their own language. They nodded and quietly withdrew, leaving the 2 young people alone by the creek. Isabella felt her heart racing as he approached, moving with that same fluid confidence she had noticed before. "You are Eduardo's daughter," he said in clear, unaccented English. "Isabella," yes, she replied, surprised by her own boldness in not fleeing. "And you are Ayana," he nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Your father speaks of you with great pride, says you have curiosity about the world beyond your small town." "I do," Isabella admitted, then added quickly, "I came to gather herbs. I didn't mean to intrude on your camp." "You were not intruding," Ayana assured her. "Would you like to see what we gathered today? Some plants that grow here have great healing properties." For the next hour, Ayana showed Isabella various plants and explained their uses in Apache medicine. His knowledge was vast and detailed, covering not only medicinal properties, but also the spiritual significance of different plants in Apache culture. Isabella found herself fascinated by his respectful relationship with the natural world. "Your people think we are savage," Ayana observed as they sat beside the creek, watching water flow over smooth stones. "But we have laws, traditions, beliefs that go back countless generations. We honor the earth that sustains us." "Not all of our people think that way," Isabella said defensively. "My father respects your culture. Yes, Eduardo is different. He sees with his heart as well as his eyes." Ayana studied her face carefully. "And you, Isabella? What do you see when you look at me?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. "I see someone who is intelligent and knowledgeable about things I've never learned. Someone who speaks with respect about his beliefs and his people." "Do you see an enemy?" "No," she replied, without hesitation. "I see someone I would like to know better." Ayana's smile broadened. "That is dangerous thinking for a young woman of your people." "Perhaps," Isabella said, meeting his gaze steadily. "But it's honest thinking." As the afternoon sun began to slant lower through the cottonwood leaves, Isabella realized she needed to return home before her absence was noticed. Ayana walked with her partway back toward town, carrying the basket of herbs she had actually managed to collect. "Will you come here again tomorrow?" he asked as they reached the edge of the trees. Isabella knew she should say no. That meeting, secretly with an Apache warrior, was exactly the kind of behavior that would confirm Mrs. Brennan's worst fears about her family. But looking into Ayana's dark eyes, she found herself nodding. At the same time, she agreed. "Good," he said simply, then melted back into the trees with such silent grace that within moments it was as if he had never been there at all. Isabella walked home with her mind spinning. She had always known her life in Copper Springs was limited, unpredictable, but now she realized it might also be built on assumptions that were fundamentally wrong. The Apache warrior she had just spent the afternoon with was nothing like the savage described by the town's leading citizens. That evening, at dinner, her father studied her face carefully. "You seem thoughtful tonight, Mia." "Papa," she said carefully, "how do you know when something is right, even if others say it's wrong?" Eduardo exchanged a meaningful look with his wife. Sometimes the heart knows truths that the mind takes longer to accept, he said gently, but wisdom lies in understanding the consequences of following your heart. Isabella nodded, but she had already made her decision. Tomorrow, she would return to Willow Creek. The third day of secret meetings at Willow Creek brought an unexpected revelation that would shake the very foundations of Isabella's understanding about herself and her family. She had been looking forward to seeing Ayanna again, their conversations, having opened her mind to perspectives she had never imagined. This time, when Isabella arrived at the creek, she found Ayanna sitting cross-legged on a woven blanket, examining what appeared to be an old piece of jewelry. As she approached, he looked up with an expression more serious than she had seen before. "Isabella," he said, rising to greet her, "there is something I must show you. Something that may explain why I was drawn to seek out your family's trading." He held out his hand, revealing a silver medallion that seemed to match the one he wore around his neck. But this one was clearly older, more worn, bore intricate engravings that caught the dappled sunlight filtering through the cottonwood leaves. "This belonged to my grandmother," Ayanna explained. "She received it from a Mexican woman, Minnie. Years ago, before I was born, a woman who saved her life." Isabella examined the medallion carefully. The workmanship was exquisite, with symbols and patterns that seemed both familiar and foreign. "It's beautiful. I don't understand why you're showing it to me." Ayanna sat back down on the blanket and gestured for Isabella to join him. "My grandmother told me this story many times. 20 years ago, when the conflicts between our peoples were at their worst, she was caught in an attack by Mexican soldiers. She had been separated from her band and was wounded, hiding in a cave near what is now your town." Isabella listened intently, sensing that this story would somehow change everything she thought she knew about her world. "A young Mexican woman found her," Ayanna continued. "Instead of calling for soldiers or fleeing in fear, this woman brought water, food, and medicine. She tended my grandmother's wounds for 3 days, risking her own life to help an Apache woman she had never seen before." "That was very brave of her," Isabella said softly. "And my grandmother was strong enough to travel." The Mexican woman gave her this medallion? "She said it had been her mother's, and she wanted my grandmother to have something to remember, that not all Mexican people were enemies. She said her name was Elena Rodriguez." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. "Rodriguez. But that's my family name." Ayanna nodded slowly. "Elena Rodriguez. A young woman with dark hair and kind eyes who spoke some Apache words she had learned from traders. She was married to a man named Eduardo." The world seemed to tilt around Isabella as the implications of Ayanna's story sank in. "Oh, my parents." "But that would mean... It would mean that your mother saved my grandmother's life," Ayanna finished gently. "And that this meeting between us is not mere chance." Isabella stared at the medallion in her hands, her mind racing. She had always known her parents had lived through the difficult early days of settling in Apache territory, but they rarely spoke of specific incidents. Her mother had always seemed to understand Apache customs better than most settlers, and her father's ease with Apache traders suddenly made more sense. "My grandmother made me promise something," Ayanna continued. "She said that if I ever had the opportunity, I should find this Elena Rodriguez and thank her. She believed that such kindness creates connections that transcend the boundaries between peoples." "But why didn't you tell my father this story when you first came to trade?" "Because I needed to be certain, and because I wanted to understand what kind of people Eduardo and Elena's children had become." Ayanna's eyes met hers directly. "Now I know that the kindness runs in your family, Isabella." That evening, Isabella returned home with her mind churning. She found her parents sitting on their small front porch, enjoying the cool evening air. After the heat of the day, her father was whittling a piece of wood, while her mother mended a torn shirt. Mama Isabella began carefully, settling on the wooden steps at their feet. "Tell me about the early days here. When you and Papa first settled in Copper Springs." Maria looked up from her sewing, exchanging a quick glance with her husband. "Those were difficult times, Mia. There was much fear and misunderstanding between different groups of people. You ever... meet any Apache people during those days?" Eduardo stopped whittling and studied his daughter's face. Why do you ask such specific questions, Isabella? Isabella pulled the old medallion from her pocket, watching as both her parents' expressions changed dramatically. Her mother's hands flew to her throat, where Isabella now noticed she wore a similar, newer medallion. "Dear God," Maria whispered, "where did you get this?" "An Apache warrior named Ayana gave it to me. He said it belonged to his grandmother, who received it from a woman named Alina Rodriguez 20 years ago." Tears began flowing down Maria's cheeks as she reached for the medallion with trembling hands. "I never knew if she survived," she whispered. "I prayed for years that she had found her way back to her people." Eduardo put his arm around his wife's shoulders. "Your mother saved that woman's life, Isabella. It was during one of the worst periods of conflict in this territory. Maria found her wounded and alone, and instead of seeking help from the soldiers, she chose to help the woman herself." "But why didn't you ever tell me this story?" "Because," Maria said, wiping her eyes, "some acts of compassion are their own reward. I didn't save that woman's life to gain anything in return. I did it because she was a human being in need of help." Isabella felt a profound shift in her understanding of her family, her own place in the complex relationships between different peoples in the territory. Her mother's act of kindness had created ripples that were still moving 20 years later, bringing an Apache warrior to their trading post, and creating the circumstances for Isabella's own growing feelings for Ayana. "There's something else," Isabella said carefully. "I've been meeting with Ayana by the creek. We've been talking about our different cultures, and I've been learning about Apache beliefs and customs." Her parents sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Eduardo spoke. "And what have you learned, Mia?" "That the Apache people are nothing like what most of the townspeople believe. They have deep spiritual beliefs, complex social structures, and a profound respect for the natural world. Ayana is educated, thoughtful, and honorable." "And how do you feel about this young man?" Maria asked gently. Isabella felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she met her mother's eyes honestly. "I think I'm falling in love with him." The words hung in the evening air, heavy with implication and consequence. Isabella knew that admitting such feelings aloud would change everything, not just for herself, but potentially for her entire family standing in the community. Eduardo sighed deeply. "Love knows no boundaries of culture or race, Isabella. But the world around us often does. The path you're considering would be difficult and dangerous." "I know, Papa. But after learning about Mama's courage in helping Ayana's grandmother, I understand that sometimes doing what's right requires taking risks." Maria reached over and took Isabella's hand. "Then we will face whatever comes together as a family. But first, I think it's time your father and I properly met this young man who has captured our daughter's heart." The formal meeting between Ayana and Isabella's parents took place 3 days later at the trading post, just as the sun was beginning its descent behind the western mountains. Eduardo had sent word through one of Ayana's companions that he requested a private conversation, and the Apache warrior had agreed immediately. Isabella watched from the store window as Ayana approached on foot rather than horseback, a gesture of respect that showed he came as a guest rather than a warrior. He had dressed carefully for the occasion, wearing traditional Apache clothing that had been beautifully crafted, a shirt of soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork, and moccasins that reflected the skill of Apache artisans. "He's handsome," Maria observed quietly, standing beside her daughter. "He carries himself with dignity." Eduardo opened the door before Ayana could knock, extending his hand in greeting. "Welcome, Ayana. Please come inside." The conversation that followed would later be remembered by Isabella as one of the most important moments of her young life. Ayana spoke with eloquence about his feelings for Isabella, his understanding of the challenges they would face, and his deep respect for her family. When Eduardo questioned him about his intentions, Ayana's response was both honest and profound. "I cannot promise that loving your daughter will be easy or without consequence," he said, looking directly into Eduardo's eyes. "But I can promise that I will honor her, protect her, and respect the values you have taught her. The connection between our families began with your wife's kindness to my grandmother, and I believe it was meant to continue." Maria had been quiet throughout most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. What do your people think about your feelings for a Mexican girl? Ayana's expression grew more serious. There are some who would disapprove, just as there are some among your people who would condemn such a relationship. But my father is a wise chief who believes that love can build bridges between peoples. He has asked to meet Isabella if she and your family are willing. The implications of this request were enormous. A formal meeting with an Apache chief would signal serious intentions and would make their relationship impossible to hide from the community. Isabella felt her heart racing with both excitement and fear. What would such a meeting involve? Eduardo asked carefully. My father's band will be traveling through this area in 2 weeks, on their way to the seasonal gathering grounds in the mountains. He would like to meet with your family to discuss the possibility of a union between Isabella and myself. Isabella nearly gasped aloud at the word union. Till this moment, their secret meetings had felt like a beautiful dream, separate from the harsh realities of the world around them. Now Ayana was speaking of marriage, a permanent joining of their lives and cultures. Over the following days, news of the planned meeting somehow spread throughout Copper Springs, despite the family's attempts at discretion. The reaction was swift and overwhelmingly negative. Thomas Brennan appeared at the store the morning after word got out, his face flushed with anger and disbelief. "You can't seriously be considering this madness," he declared. Confronting Isabella as she arranged bolts of fabric on the shelves, "My father has spoken to the territorial authorities. They could arrest your entire family for consorting with hostiles." "Ayana's people are not hostiles," Isabella replied firmly. "They're peaceful traders who want only to live according to their traditional ways that include scalping innocent settlers." Thomas shot back. "Isabella, I've been patient with your confusion, but this has gone too far. I'm prepared to offer you marriage and respectability. Don't throw away your future for some savage." "Don't call him that," Isabella said, her voice rising. "And don't presume to know what my future should be." The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Marcus Winters, a gruff man in his 50s who had been appointed to keep order in the growing territory. Behind him stood Mrs. Brennan and 2 other prominent townswomen, their faces set in expressions of righteous determination. "Eduardo," the sheriff called out, "we need to talk." Isabella's father emerged from behind the counter, his expression calm but wary. "Good morning, Sheriff. What brings you here?" "You know damn well what brings me here," Winters replied. "This business with the Apache. The good people of this town are concerned about what you're planning." "I'm planning to meet with a man who wishes to discuss his intentions toward my daughter," Eduardo said evenly. "That seems reasonable and proper to me." "Proper?" Mrs. Brennan interjected shrilly. "There's nothing proper about consorting with heathens. You're putting every family in this town at risk with your reckless behavior." Sheriff Winters held up his hand for silence. "Eduardo, I've known you for 5 years. You're a good man and a fair trader. But this situation is getting out of hand. I've received complaints from the territorial governor's office." "Complaints about what, exactly?" "About a Mexican trader who's encouraging Apache presence in settled areas? About a family that's undermining efforts to maintain peace by encouraging unnatural associations." Isabella felt anger boiling up inside her. "What's unnatural about 2 people caring for each other, young lady?" Sheriff Winters said sternly. "You're talking about mixing races, mixing cultures that have been at war for generations. It's not natural, and it's not safe." "My mother saved an Apache woman's life 20 years ago," Isabella declared, ignoring her father's warning gesture. "That Apache woman was Ayana's grandmother. If helping people in need and building understanding between cultures is wrong, then I'm proud to be wrong." The revelation caused a stir among the townspeople. Mrs. Brennan gasped audibly while Thomas Brennan stared at Isabella as if she had suddenly grown horns. "That's different," Sheriff Winters said uncomfortably. "That was a single act of Christian charity. This is talking about permanent ... alliance with people who could turn on us at any moment. The only people who have turned on anyone today are standing in my store threatening my family," Isabella replied boldly. "That afternoon, After the sheriff and townspeople had left with warnings about the consequences of proceeding with the meeting, Isabella sat with her parents in their kitchen, discussing the difficult choice they faced. "We could leave," Maria said quietly. "Move to California or Texas, start over somewhere else. And live, always looking over our shoulders." Eduardo shook his head. "No, mi amor. We've built a life here through honest work and fair dealing. I won't be driven away by fear and prejudice. But what about Isabella's safety?" Maria continued. "And what about Ayana? If this meeting goes forward, they'll both be in danger." Isabella looked at both her parents, feeling the weight of the decision they faced. "I won't ask you to sacrifice everything for my happiness, but I also won't let fear choose my life for me. If Ayana's father is willing to travel here to meet with us, despite the risks to his own people, then we should be brave enough to meet with him." Eduardo reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. "Then we'll meet with the chief. Whatever happens afterward, we'll face it together as a family." Outside their window, the sun was setting over Copper Springs, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight Isabella felt something she had never experienced before: the courage that comes from choosing love over fear, even when the cost might be everything she had ever known. The day of the meeting with Chief Nalnish dawned clear and cool. Isabella had barely slept, her mind racing with excitement and fear. She wore her finest blue dress, with white lace trim, and braided her dark hair with matching ribbons. The Apache delegation arrived at mid-morning. 12 riders approached in ceremonial formation, with Chief Nalnish at the center. He was a man in his 50s, who commanded immediate respect. Isabella could see the family resemblance between him and Ayana. Eduardo had cleared a space behind the trading post for their meeting circle. Maria prepared simple food that would honor Apache customs. Several townspeople gathered to watch, including Sheriff Winters with his hand on his gun belt. Chief Nalnish dismounted gracefully. He wore traditional ceremonial clothing with silver ornaments and turquoise stones. His gray hair was bound with leather cords, and he carried himself with natural authority. Ayana spoke first. "My father greets the Rodriguez family with respect and gratitude." Eduardo extended his hand. "Chief Nalnish honors our home. We welcome you." The chief studied Eduardo before accepting the handshake. "Your wife saved my mother's life 20 years ago. This created a debt of honor between our families." Maria stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Your mother was brave and deserved help. I'm grateful she survived to see her grandson grow into such a fine man." For an hour, both families sat sharing food and conversation. Chief Nalnish explained his people's situation and their commitment to finding peaceful ways to preserve their traditional life. "My son has told me of his feelings for your daughter," he said, looking at Isabella. "Among our people, such feelings are gifts from the spirits." Isabella maintained eye contact despite her warming cheeks. "Your son has shown me great respect. He's taught me to see the world differently. What do you see in a future with him?" The direct question required complete honesty. "I see the possibility of building bridges between our peoples, showing that love can overcome fear. I also see challenges we would face together." Chief Nalnish nodded approvingly. "Wisdom lies in understanding both possibilities and costs." He turned to her parents. "What do you see in such a union?" Eduardo considered carefully. "I see two young people who care deeply and represent the best of their cultures, but also the real dangers they would face in a world that punishes those who cross cultural boundaries." Maria leaned forward. "Ow. But we also see the example their love could provide. Sometimes one brave act changes many hearts." The chief smiled. "For the first time, your wife speaks with wisdom." He paused thoughtfully. "Among my people, a young man must prove he can provide for his wife, but these are unusual circumstances." Ayana spoke up. "Father, if Isabella agrees to marry me, I want us to live honoring both cultures. We could establish a trading post serving as a bridge between our peoples." Isabella's heart leaped. Creating something together that could benefit both communities appealed to her completely. "Such a venture would require courage," Chief Nalnish observed. "You would face opposition, Are you prepared? Before Isabella could answer, approaching horses shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Sheriff Winters arrived with 6 armed men. Apache warriors rose instantly, hands moving toward weapons, but Chief Nolnish's gesture kept them calm.
Chief
Nolnish, Sheriff Winters called, dismounting, but keeping his gun hand ready. I need you and your people to move along. This gathering is making folks nervous. We are conducting a peaceful meeting on private property, Eduardo said firmly. These are invited guests. The situation is getting out of hand, Winters replied. Some ranchers are talking about taking matters into their own hands. Isabella felt fear chill her. Violence was being threatened if they proceeded. Chief Nolnish spoke with calm authority. Sheriff, we committed no crimes, came peacefully to honor family debt and discuss our children's future. Is this not permitted? Your people and ours have been at war for generations, one deputy interjected.
Right.
We can't forget that for romantic foolishness. The only foolishness, Isabella said. Stepping forward despite her father's restraint is refusing to see that peace must start somewhere. Miss Rodriguez, Winters said wearily, this isn't a fairy tale. Real people could get hurt. Real people are already hurt by hatred and fear, Isabella replied, including Ayana and myself. Chief Nolnish assessed the threat level carefully. After a moment, he spoke to his son in Apache, then addressed the sheriff. We will depart as requested. But this matter is not finished. We will find another way that brings honor to all. As they prepared to leave, Ayana spoke quietly to Isabella. This isn't the end. My father approves of my choice. We will find a way. When? Isabella asked urgently. Meet me at Willow Creek tomorrow night when the moon is full. I will have a proposal. Isabella nodded, heart pounding with hope and fear. Watching Ayana ride away, she realized her old life was already over. The confrontation made clear there would be no peaceful coexistence with those opposing their relationship. That evening, discussing the day's events, Eduardo made a prophetic observation. The sheriff is right that this will escalate and people will get hurt. But it won't be our desire for peace causing violence. It will be others' fear and hatred. So what do we do? Ria asked. Isabella looked at her parents. We meet with Ayana tomorrow and hear his proposal. Then we decide if love is worth fighting for. The full moon cast silver light as Isabella walked to Willow Creek for what might be her final meeting with Ayana. Yesterday's events had changed everything. She carried a small bundle of precious belongings, uncertain what the night would bring. Ayana waited in the moonlit clearing, but he wasn't alone. An elderly Apache woman stood beside him, radiating wisdom and strength. Isabella recognized her immediately. This was his grandmother, the woman her mother had saved. Isabella, Ayana said softly, Meet my grandmother, Stasu. She insisted on coming to meet the daughter of the woman who gave her life back. The old woman stepped forward, studying Isabella's face with knowing eyes. You have your mother's eyes, kind eyes that see the person, not just differences. Isabella felt tears welling. My mother treasures the memory of helping you. She said it was one of the most important things she ever did. It was, Desber replied simply. Now the circle completes itself through you and my grandson. Ayana took Isabella's hands. My grandmother brings a proposal from our council. They understand that staying would bring danger to both families and the entire community. Isabella's heart sank. So you're leaving. We are leaving, Ayana corrected. All of us. My father's band is traveling north to join other peaceful Apache groups in Colorado territory. The land is good, and the government agreed to let us live traditionally as long as we remain peaceful. But what does that have to do with me? Desba spoke up. Everything, child. We want you to come with us, you and your family. Isabella stared in shock. My family? But we're not Apache. We have our home, our business. Home is where your heart can grow in peace, the old woman replied. Your heart is with my grandson. As for business, we need traders who understand both Apache and Mexican ways. Ayana squeezed her hands. I know it's asking everything. But love that tries to survive where it's not welcome withers and dies. What we have is too precious for that. Over the next hour, they painted a picture of their new life. The Colorado settlement would be built around peaceful coexistence. They needed bridge builders, traders, interpreters, teachers, helping children of different cultures learn together. Your mother's kindness showed our peoples could help each other, Desba explained. You and Ayana can build something lasting. On that foundation, Isabella's mind raced. Leaving meant abandoning everything she'd ever known. But staying meant losing Ayana and living under constant disapproval. What about the dangers of traveling so far? Isabella asked. There are always dangers, Ayana acknowledged. But there are dangers in staying too. In Colorado, we'd face them together, building something new rather than fighting to preserve something already lost. I need to discuss this with my parents. This affects all of us. Of course, Ayana agreed. Time is important. Yesterday's confrontation showed tensions escalating. My father begins the journey north in 3 days. Desba reached into a leather pouch and withdrew something wrapped in cloth. Before you go, I want you to have this. She revealed a beautiful silver bracelet with turquoise stones. I made this from silver your mother gave me. She insisted I take her jewelry to trade for supplies. I saved this piece to return when the time was right. Isabella accepted the bracelet with trembling hands, recognizing it matched her mother's medallion. It's beautiful. But shouldn't this go back to my mother? It should go to the daughter of the woman who saved my life, the young woman brave enough to love my grandson despite all obstacles, Desba replied firmly. Walking home through moonlit desert, Isabella felt the weight of decision. Everything she'd imagined about her future was changing. The safe, predictable life seemed small compared to the possibilities they'd described. She found her parents at the kitchen table. Having waited up, they looked expectantly as she entered. They want us to come with them to Colorado, Isabella said without preamble. All of us. They're establishing a new settlement and need traders who understand different cultures. Eduardo and Maria exchanged a long look before her father spoke. And what do you want, Mia? I want to be with Ayana, but not at the cost of destroying. Our family are forcing you to give up everything. We've already lost what we worked hardest for, Maria said quietly. We built our life hoping to create a place where different people could live together peacefully. Yesterday showed that may not be possible here. Eduardo considered thoughtfully. A trading post at a new Apache settlement. Challenging work, but exactly the kind of bridge building this territory needs. You would really consider it? Isabella asked hopefully. Mia, her father smiled slightly. Your mother and I came here 20 years ago with nothing but hope. We built success through hard work and fair dealing. If we're young enough for another adventure, why not one that lets our daughter follow her heart? Maria took Isabella's hand. Besides, I've always wondered what became of that brave Apache woman. Now I can find out and see what kind of community her people might build. Isabella felt tears of relief and joy. So we'll go, Eduardo confirmed. We'll sell what we can, pack what we need, and start a new chapter together. 3 days later, as the sun rose over Arizona desert, two families began their journey toward an uncertain but hopeful future. The Apache band moved north with traditional skill, while the Rodriguez family traveled in their wagon loaded with trade goods, as Copper Springs disappeared behind them. Isabella rode beside Ayana on the horse he'd given her as a wedding gift. They'd married the previous evening in a ceremony honoring both traditions. With Chief Nulnish and Eduardo offering blessings. Any regrets? Ayana asked as they crested a hill, offering a final view of the settlement. Isabella thought of those they were leaving, some who would be relieved, others who might someday understand what they'd tried to accomplish. No regrets, she said firmly. Only hope for what we can build together.